Hello everyone, this is Charles Laughlin from the Local Search Association. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking today about the Tech Adoption Index, which is a new initiative from the Local Search Association where we're sort of tracking the SMB shift to the cloud. And at the start of this, I want to acknowledge that the Tech Adoption Index has two charter sponsors, Dex Media and Google, and we want to thank them for their support of this initiative. So moving right into it, today I'm Charles Laughlin with the LSA, and I'm joined by Neil Polachek, who's an advisor to the LSA, working with us on this initiative. Hi, Neil. Welcome to the
Good morning, Charles. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good morning. Neil's on the West Coast. I'm in the Central Time Zone, so it's either good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are. I know we have attendees from around the world today, and we want to thank all of you for joining us. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about, again, the Tech Adoption Index, which is, again, it's a new initiative we've developed. It's a combination of survey research, forecasting, ongoing coverage and analysis of a shift that we think is very profound for this industry, and it involves SMBs adopting cloud-based tools to run their businesses. And this slide just shows an example of some of the companies sort of swirling around this space, and we're going to be covering these companies and many others closely as they sort of grow and acquire more customers and then add more services to serve those customers. And that's sort of the nut of what we're going to be talking about, is sort of how that evolution impacts the broader space of selling whatever it is to SMBs, whether it's marketing services or advertising or cloud-based tools, et cetera. So Neil, why don't we talk?
Yeah. So I know there was some of the promotion for this webinar was something about storm clouds. I actually think about the clouds, the skies are clearing. You know, these SMBs, and many of you are intimate and passionate with what SMBs are challenged with and passionate about trying to solve that. And, you know, it's really about using technology to enable SMBs, to enable merchants to actually serve their customers, whether it's in a food store, a florist, a dentist, perhaps a plumber, an auto mechanic, or a roofer, or what have you. It's really about leveraging technology that's being built for enterprises, that's now being moved down to the small and medium-sized business market, and really, you know, how merchants are going to start to leverage those technologies to have better customer experiences. Now,
so why is Shatner here?
Well, because if you remember, you know, he was the original Priceline promoter, and this is going to be big. It's going to be really big. And I think it's already big, and that people are starting to come to the notion that how SMBs adopt and adapt in this changing technology environment is really critical. One of the things that, you know, impedes the success of small businesses is that today, according to this Intuit study, they only get to spend 36% of their day actually providing services. So the rest of the time they're doing marketing, they're doing accounting, they're doing employee management. Selling might be considered part of doing that, but technology can really change that. And that's really what we think this is all about and why it's so important. And as I said earlier, it's really why this is happening is because all that enterprise technology that was built by Oracle and Salesforce and large cloud, the early cloud folks, is now being enabled for small and medium-sized businesses. And it's really opening up a whole set of opportunities. We know this is happening in part because we look at some of the funding rounds into this marketplace. And I just screen captured a few things from Crunchbase, but you know, there are loads and buckets full of money going after this marketplace to really bring these enterprise solutions that are built in the cloud and down to the SMB marketplace. One of the things that I'm pretty passionate about is this notion of customer experience and how it over time, it is and will continue over time be more and more important. And the customer experience will define winners and losers. Well, if you go back to the slide, and you don't need to go back to it, Charlie, but the slide around small businesses spending just 36% of their day doing the service, that's not a good customer experience. And so this technology opens the door for these merchants to spend more time on their customer experience and less time on these sort of business process things that get kind of often quite complicated. And if you think about how technology is operating today, I think the notion that Jeff Bezos put out here in this quote, put the customer first. Make that the focus of what you do every day as a merchant, frankly, as an enterprise, anybody today. Everything in my, this is a longer discussion, probably more philosophical, but everything is being moved to a commodity basis. All products and services ultimately will be moved to kind of a commodity basis because of technology, and the only thing that will differentiate winners and losers in that race to commoditization is, frankly, the customer experience, how you deliver on the proposition, how you treat your customers, how they get back to you, how you engage with them. And that's
how easy is it to onboard and use the technology?
Right. So it's a big deal, as Williams said. It's a really big deal. This technology adoption or tech adoption index is really an initiative. As LSA thinks about it, as we think about it, there are really four components to it. Charles will run through the survey that we just completed, highlights from that survey. But we're going to also have signals. When we talk about signals, we're going to look for a partner to help LSA understand what are the empirical signals out there around merchants using these technologies. Then Charles and I will be building some forecasts as part of this index, and there'll be a resource which will be something that will be over at the LSA around identifying and looking for companies that are in this ecosystem. So, I think Tech Adoption Index is a nice short version of what is really a much broader tech adoption initiative. Charles?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Neil. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show just a little taste of the survey results from the Tech Adoption Index. We've run one wave of the survey. Our intention is to run 2 waves per year, so we'll be running another wave in the fall. It's 1,000 sample per survey, per wave, and it's going to be a good representative mix of SMBs across a number of verticals, which we note here, auto, retail, professional services, and so on. And then we're focusing in the research on several aspects of SMB operations and looking at where small businesses are using new technologies, new software tools, primarily SaaS tools, cloud-based, to run their businesses. And the idea is to understand, from the beginning, what the adoption picture looks like, both currently, point in time, and then what the future looks like in terms of intention to adopt cloud-based tools. And this will, this gives us some insight into how rapidly the shift is taking place, where it's taking place first, where it's perhaps lagging a bit, and then so on. And we're looking at it across several areas, again, sort of the plumbing, the meat and potatoes of operating a business, making payroll, handling your supply chain, handling your accounting and taxes, handling invoicing customers, or handling point of sale payments, if you're which applies to almost every business, and then organizing your customer list and making good use of it, which is CRM. Now, CRM can be anything from a ledger with a list of customers and their phone numbers in and people scratched off and names written over it, and it could all the way up to a sophisticated CRM platform. So these are the areas we're looking at, and of course, sales and marketing is sort of the core business of the LSA constituency. I also want to understand, how much of that is shifting to sort of self-serve, cloud-based tools as well.
And I think, Charles, what we're seeing is that, what technology is also doing now is it's really blurring the boundaries between these various
right,
what you call plumbing plumbing solutions.
Well, there's a lot of overlap among these.
Yes, there's overlap and there's blurring of lines and blurring of boundaries because technology is making it so easy to deploy these things.
Right, and as we'll get into a little bit further, once you have a customer, buying a subscription software package, there's an incentive to expand your yield from that customer. So there's going to be an expansion into adjacent services, which we're already seeing happening. And that's sort of the meat of what drove us to sort of look at this, which is, you're seeing a company like Square, payments. I think they were announcing the other day they're getting into they're looking at getting into lending. They're, I think you can do various marketing functions through Square as well now. So that's that expansion that's most meaningful, I think, to this this
Totally agree.
Yeah. Okay, so what are we going to talk about here? A couple puns in here, forgive us, please. Shift happens, inertia, disruption, give me the combo, and big money. So each of these sort of refers to a bit of data that we're going to share today. So let's start with the first one, the shift that's taking place today. So this is from the survey, and this basically is we're asking small businesses, what have you adopted thus far in terms of moving from a traditional service? And the traditional can mean anything from in payroll, for example, that could be using a Paychex or an ADP, to moving it to Gusto, for example. That's a good example of a cloud-based transition. Now, Paychex and ADP, of course, as with any traditional provider, is going to try to catch up on the cloud game, but that they're being pushed in that way from a sort of a native cloud-based tool like a Gusto. In CRM, we're seeing is clearly the sort of the leader in this, in terms of this is where the adoption seems to be taking place first.
Well, I tend to think, Charles, of the CRM as almost the heart. Ultimately, will be the heart of sort of the SMB OS ecosystem. That they'll adopt a CRM platform, and from that, things will happen. Right. They'll do marketing campaigns off of that platform. They'll do customer engagement things off of those platforms, off of that. So CRM, I kind of think of CRM
about
analytics. Mm-hmm. I think of that as kind of the heart of this of their ecosystem.
Right. So again, it's leading with CRM, but certainly we're seeing meaningful early adoption across the areas that we're looking at. Okay, so the next slide is about intent to switch. So the previous slide was, okay, we've already switched. Among those who have not yet switched, what is your intent? And I believe we asked for within the next
12 months
to a year. Yeah, up to, I think, the next 3 years or something. This is all intent to switch. And again, CRM is leading the charge, but again, meaningful numbers across the board. If you add sort of stack those two together, which we didn't for this, but you can do the math. I mean, we start to get into, pretty meaningful numbers of switch.
Across the 50% line, pretty much.
In many cases, yeah. Okay, so, but we're still seeing some, some resistance, some inertia. And one of the things that we're going to do with the data that we have is really sort of dig into what is where are the resistance points? How does that map to verticals? How does that map to age of business, size of business, that sort of thing? But what we're seeing overall is 57% of SMBs are comfortable with their existing tools. In other words, that's, to be clear, that's the response when asked, what are the reasons why you aren't shifting? It's not 57% of all SMBs. It's of those who didn't shift or aren't going to shift. What was the primary reason? And they just simply said, we're comfortable with what we have. So there's a core of resistance as well, even though we're seeing pretty strong adoption. But that core of resistance, I think, tends to be, you see older businesses that have been in business longer, more used to their tools, et cetera. I think as we see businesses form, especially smaller businesses, where I think we're going to see them form in the cloud instead of forming with older school processes, and then sort of being resistant to change them because they built their whole business around using these tools. Sort of old.
What'll be interesting to see, Charles, is if when we run the next wave, if this number goes down because of that migration or that exiting of sort of, you know, the retiring businesses exiting the space.
Yeah.
And,
I think that'll become clear over several waves. But,
yeah, I think so too. It'll be interesting to see if that shows up. But that would be my prediction.
Yeah. Okay. So the next we're going to talk about, you know, disruption and desire for sort of simplicity and aggregation of solutions. So we asked a couple of questions about, you know, well, first of all, we asked a question about if you were to purchase, I'll just read the question the way it is, purchase services outside of the core service of a particular provider, from which would you more likely to do so? It was hard to word this question, but what we're trying to get at is, you know, if you're a Square customer and Square's offering you, let's just make this up, you know, social media advertising, or if your media company that you deal with or your digital agency that you deal with is offering you payroll software or point of sale, you know, from which are you more likely to give them a hearing or give them a listen? And 62% said they prefer the cloud tech companies over the media companies. You can really, we make a lot of inferences for why this is. I've got a couple theories. One is that, you know, the cloud software, it's a newer thing. It's generally been probably a fairly good experience for them. It's a self-serve experience for the most part. And it works. I mean, I think, I mean, there are certainly examples of people who have had bad experiences with these companies, but by and large, you know, they're fairly good at customer experience. So that's going to create a warmer feeling than the media salesperson who they've dealt with over the years. And perhaps, you know, the data that we've all seen over and over again about the 30, you know, sales touches per month, it's been sort of a nuisance factor for a lot of small businesses, and I think that probably is reflected here.
I think that also, Charles, sets up an opportunity, though, for those who are perceived as media-centric to evolve their positioning and their branding so that they are, you know, become more perceived as a tech provider that also provisions media stuff as opposed to a media provider that, you know, locks on some tech.
Right. This is not game over. This is just a little wake-up call that you have to reposition your business if you want to get into this area. I think
so.
Yeah, very much so. And I think we're seeing examples of that emerging. So next thing we got into here is we asked, you know, this, interestingly, I was at one of LSA's boot camps in Atlanta I guess a couple months back, and sat around the table with a group of that sort of random group of SMBs that we invited to sit with us at lunch, and just asked them about their use of cloud tools. And excuse me, you know, there was a general consensus there that they preferred some simplicity. And, you know, in fact, someone just sort of volunteered without being asked. I just wish somebody would put this all together with me so I could, you know, theoretically at least write one check. And so we asked that question in the survey, and what we found is that, you know, 60% would prefer to work with a single provider. And I know from my previous days of working on research, you know, with BI Kelsey and the Local Commerce Monitor, which has been a great tracking study around media usage among small businesses. You know, there was always, there was kind of a similar number about, if my recollection is correct, about, you know, adopting, you know, sort of bundled solutions, having, you know, package it all up for me. I think there's always a strong majority that want to do this, but a very sizable minority that also, you know, likes the flexibility of picking and choosing their tools. So this suggests an opportunity, but I don't think the opportunity has ever been overwhelming. I think there's always that core, there are a lot of small businesses that just like that independence. It's like, no, I want the best of all, or I don't want to have all my eggs in one basket, or I don't want to be too dependent on a single provider. But nonetheless, most like the idea of the convenience.
I think when it comes to this tech stuff, though, what I think we're going to see is that integration, simplicity and integration will be the sort of themes that really define the winner in this stuff.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if I'm stitching together 4 or 5 apps from different folks, they're going to have to integrate and work. Otherwise, I'm going to go back to that slide. I'm comfortable with what I'm using today because
Right.
it's too difficult to stitch these things together. So I really believe that the notion of simplicity and integration is what people should be thinking about as they start thinking about how to add other elements into a solution or how to work with others in this space. It's got to work pretty seamlessly. And we all know enough about technology that that's really hard to do. That is not easy, but it gets easier and easier.
This analogy will date me a little bit, but remember like when they had the TV with the built-in VHS player or the built-in DVD player? It's like you never get the best TV or the best player that way, but you get them together in one machine. But you know, eventually the one piece would break, but the TV would still be working. And so it was like never the best of all worlds. But it was convenient, and I don't think if that's what we end up with these integrations, then that's not going to be sufficient. It has to be.
And there's another dimension to this too, Charlie, and I think that's, you know, there will be players who decide that they're going to go after a specific vertical and sort of stitch all these things together
within that vertical, right? Yeah.
For a vertical, you know, be it restaurants, we see Upserve.
We're seeing that happening already, right? Yeah.
Or being auto mechanic. There are a bunch of these out there. And the question will be, can they stitch together something that's really simple, that's really integrated, and that works? And time will tell to see whether or not that vertical approach or the horizontal approach will be the winner. And it probably will be like, it's easy to say it'll be both, but we'll see.
No, but feels like the vertical approach will be the first way that those services are integrated across a single business, but it'll be within a vertical. So most likely. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the dollars. Now, Neil and I are just in the beginning stages of our forecast effort. We have a survey in hand. We have a profile database that's largely been built, but it's being refined. The next wave of our efforts is to build a forecast using a number of inputs, but sort of a starting line number was shared with me by Sunir Shah in a podcast interview I did with him recently, where you know, he sort of, I was probably better than a swag, but estimated that 10 billion is sort of the worldwide SMB SaaS figure of it right now. So we're sort of starting, the starting line here is about a $10 billion industry globally. What we're going to do is try to break that down using inputs from our own survey research, from information we're gathering on companies in the space and so on, to build a forecast. And Neil, I'm going to let you talk about our process.
One second, Charles. Yeah. Where can you hear that podcast?
Oh, it's on LSA. You can find it on the LSA website. There's it's the On Target podcast.
Okay. So the forecast that we're going to build, there are a bunch of key inputs that we're looking at, and outputs, I guess. You know, we're leaning towards looking at an addressable market of 20 million. When Charles and I and others at the Kelsey Group and BIA used to run the local commerce monitor, you know, we often looked at, you know, I used to like to use 10 million as the addressable market for media and advertising. But as we think about this cloud stuff, you know, we think it's a larger addressable market because there are a lot of solutions that a small SOHO independent person, perhaps like me, might use in the cloud. So we do believe that it's a larger market in terms of the denominator, and we're looking at using, there are a couple of numbers out there. I think Intuit uses a number of 23 million. Maybe GoDaddy looks at a similar number. So we'll be using probably a larger denominator to do our stuff. Go back for a second, Charles.
Okay.
Then we'll look at revenue to date of public companies. We'll do some revenue estimates of private companies. We'll look at some of the pricing models, vertical versus horizontal approaches. And importantly, we want a dialogue with people who are interested in this, and so we're looking to you as a key input into this forecasting process. That said, here's some illustrative, let me say illustrative.
Yeah, we have to be clear about that.
Of the kind of output we'll be doing in the initiative. We'll be looking at subscription versus transaction versus other models. So how are they spending? Are they spending on a SaaS subscription or transaction? There are a number of companies in this space that are going to do transaction-related pricing. So we'll be looking at that. The next slide, we'll be looking at, who's winning? Are the vertical players winning or the horizontal players winning? And what is their relative share of the spending, of the cloud spending? If we look at the next one, the next slide, we'll also be looking at, how to go to market and how these SMBs are buying these cloud solutions. Will they be buying them via direct sales people or in some sort of marketplace, some sort of buy-it-yourself marketplace? And again, these are all illustrative. And then finally, we'll be looking at it in terms of spending by what we call these Uber categories: home services, retail, professional, auto, and personal. And ideally, we'll break those down even further. Maybe someone will come along and say, we're focused on this smaller vertical, and we'll be able to heavy up in that category in our survey and build out some forecasts that ties directly to perhaps a smaller slice of that vertical. So, that's where we're headed. We really appreciate the sponsorship support of DEX and Google, and certainly we're open to other sponsors who are interested and want to be part of this, what I call organic, ongoing initiative.
And we will also be offering the opportunity to subscribe to the service if you want to get access to the full set of data and the forecast, and then access to the profile database. You can contact us if you want to find out more about that. All right. So thanks again, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a great afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Charles. Take care.